This is my custom Sigma FP photography setup. Yes, it's weird looking, and by most standards it shouldn't work. But regardless, it's become the one camera I always grab when I'm walking out the door. It's not just small, it's modular, comfortable, and has incredible image quality. But it's taken several years of using this camera extensively to really dial in this custom setup. For instance, I designed this aluminum cold shoe mount because I wanted the lightest option to attach cold shoe accessories. And I CNC'd this handle myself out of redwood, since all the ones I tried didn't feel quite as comfortable as I thought that they could be. And I paired this camera with an unconventional lens from half-frame film cameras from the 1960s. It's not even intended for full frame. But regardless, all of this is to make a camera that's often overlooked into something that I use daily for street and travel photography. This is still one of the smallest full-frame cameras out there, despite being released in 2019. I got mine in 2021, and while I got it for making short films and other creative videos, I have gravitated more and more towards photography over the past couple of years. I like that I can use it for either purpose, and while it's not the best camera for either use, it encourages deliberate use, and it's fully modular, so you can customize it for whatever you feel like shooting. However, it doesn't handhold your shooting experience. That's kind of the point, though. It doesn't have IBIS, it doesn't have mechanical shutter, the class-leading autofocus or flash sync settings that you would expect from a flagship mirrorless camera. But I use it mainly in manual focus in aperture priority mode, shooting DNG, protecting the highlights at all costs. The FP feels like it's made to work with vintage glass. It's L-mount, so it means like most modern mirrorless cameras, you can adapt to pretty much anything. And the punch-in zoom feels better on this camera than all the other ones that I've tried. It makes it really quick and easy to check focus along with focus peaking for using manual lenses. While I do sometimes miss the mechanical shutter on this camera, it does mean that you can even use even more lenses, including some weird collapsible ones that were intended for rangefinders, like from Leica. Okay, so on to the mods. We got the cold shoe viewfinder bracket. There was no lightweight cold shoe solution out there for the FP without adding a cage or a half cage, so I made this one. And the design was pretty much to avoid either using a cage or making some janky cold shoe pad that was stuck to it with adhesive. That would have not been as rigid and frankly just not look that great to me. So I decided to go with aluminum laser cut and bent into shape, since it offered the best way to have a thin and rigid mount. On top of the bent frame, I sourced a off-the-shelf cold shoe mount that works with it, and it fits the shape and profile of the laser cut part. The side of the bracket has two 1/4-20 threads to attach camera straps, and it has two 1/4-20s on the top as well. I designed the shape of it to match the cold shoe like I mentioned, but also it was to increase the surface area on the top of the camera as the shape extends to the back of the camera on top and provides a little bit more contact area and grip. I even ordered these small pins to insert as an anti-twist pin with an arbor press for future iterations. And the end goal of this project is to make one out of brass and use brass blackener so that it patinas over time just like some of the vintage Leicas. I think that would look really great. So I designed this to solve a problem which I find many camera grips have, in which that they don't seem to actually be designed to fit your hand. What I mean is that every time I grip onto a camera, there's this empty pocket in my palm where basically nothing is there to support the weight of the camera. And over time, it makes my hand just feel sore from trying to grip with my fingers as opposed to just having it firmly in my palm. So for this grip, I modeled it with a palm relief similar to what you would see on handguns. And I find that that molds much better in my hand. And it protrudes a little bit, but barely any to really make a difference in terms of weight or bulkiness. I also designed this one with an anti-twist pin and a thumb rest at the top. And the whole goal was to make it as slim as possible without sacrificing durability. I'm aware that redwood isn't the best choice since it's a softwood, It was just what I had available at the time. What is that? What is this? Nope. So for the future iterations, I'm going to be making it out of a hardwood like oak or walnut, which now I have. And now that the design is more or less locked, I can go ahead and start making those. I'm also going to add a 1/4-20 insert so that the strap mount can be added to the right side, just like the Sigma HG11 grip. And if there's enough interest in these accessories, I'll consider making them and selling them on my Etsy. So please let me know. So for the TEWE viewfinder, I really had high hopes that this would be the one viewfinder that I could use going from 35 millimeters all the way to 200 millimeters, and that I could even use it as a director's viewfinder for scoping narrative work and checking focal lengths before filming. But unfortunately, it just really doesn't work well with glasses, and you really have to jam it all the way up close to your eyeball to really see the edges and the corners. So for me, I wasn't able to get close enough. But I think this is a really cool way to make it a more analog experience with the Sigma FP. So I am going to be probably selling this one and getting a fixed 40 millimeter focal length. I know there's some high quality ones from Voigtlander and Ricoh, but there's also a cheap option which may or may not work out. But I mean, if you don't wear glasses, this could be a super awesome accessory. And if that were me, I would definitely end up still purchasing this because you can find them pretty cheap for around $100. Mine was $100, but they tend to vary from 100 to 200. But it seems like a really cool tool and a small one, to be honest, for getting that full range from 35 to 200. I also picked up this tiny 40 millimeter waist level viewfinder on eBay since I was trying to still decide on whether I should use the Dark Power Labs screen modification to make it a flip screen, but I do not quite know if I want to sacrifice the weather sealing on the pen app on the Sigma FP, but I may do that in the future, so remains to be seen. But this little waist level viewfinder has helped getting some lower angle shots in the meantime. Then onto the lens, the Olympus Pen F 38mm f1.8. And the way I use it is there's this little trick I've come up with to switch between crop and uncropped mode quickly. The Olympus Pen F 38mm f1.8 is what I ended up using the most, but it's actually designed for a half frame camera system, so it only covers an APS-C sized image circle. I even did a whole video on all of the Olympus Pen standard lenses, all 5 of them around the same 50 millimeter equivalent focal length. But the 38 1.8 stood out because it was the sharpest, and also it actually covers most of the full frame size. So that's the one I have been using mostly on my full frame gear. And yes, it still requires a little bit of cropping to get rid of the vignette. I think it's around 10 to 20%, but sometimes I prefer just leaving that vignette in for creative effect. But the real advantage of using this lens on the FP is the quick crop setup that I have found. And it's, I think, the fastest way to configure the Sigma FP to jump into APS-C crop mode with 2 buttons. So here you can see that I set up the top left quick start menu position as DC crop. And so with one click of the QS button and one turn of the top dial, I can quickly switch in and out of APS-C crop mode. And I believe I looked this up, but there's no other way to directly customize it to one button. So this, I believe, is the fastest way to jump in between both. And when I do that, this becomes a 57 millimeter equivalent crop for the FP. For me personally, a 38 and 57 millimeter combo feels like it's the most useful pairing when you're considering what focal length will multiply by 1.5 zoom. So 38 millimeter is like perfect for me. 40 millimeter is kind of what I gravitate towards, and that works well enough for a wide normal. And then the 58 millimeter plus a little extra crop, since you get sharp images, can work as a good normal telephoto lens. And here are some image shots of the 38 millimeter. But when I'm not using this lens, I actually have this sleeper portrait lens that I really don't see many people talking about. but it's become one of my favorites, and that is the Jupiter 3 50mm f1.5. And it's quite possibly the best portrait lens that I never hear anyone talk about. It's a lens from Soviet Russia, and it's absolutely tiny. Even with the L-mount adapter, it's basically the same size as the half-frame lenses from Olympus. And it's not very sharp wide open. Even up to f2.8, it's pretty soft. But once you jump below that, it creates this beautiful bokeh and a very unique, dreamy haze, which really helps to soften up the digital image. So I may do a video about this sleeper lens, honestly, because I feel like it doesn't get enough praise. But that's the second lens that I've been using a lot on the FP. And here are some image shots of the Jupiter lens. And so despite the quirks of this camera, I've found some really interesting ways to mod it and make it my own, and truly enjoy using it for general photography and street photography, despite all of the limitations. And I really just like how it looks in general after adding these little touches. However, I know that it's not for everyone, definitely very limiting in certain ways. But I think the diehard community of FP users will speak to how capable these cameras are when you put up with some of the inconveniences, because there's still a lot to gain. And I've barely touched on all of the ways I configured the FP in the menu system to set it up for photography, so I'll likely make a video next about that in the future. But in the meantime, I would love to hear how you have customized your camera in a weird, unconventional way. So let me know in the comments, and see you in the next one.